We're in the 50th year, the 50th year anniversary of Title IX. It's something to definitely be celebrated. There is no greater leader in the Title IX space than Stanford University and Stanford Athletics. So I'm just really honored to be here this morning to moderate this great panel. My name is Teresa Gould. I'm the Deputy Commissioner at the Pac-12 Conference. This is my 34th year working in NCAA Division I college athletics, and I have to say Title IX has meant a lot to my journey. There's no question that I wouldn't have had the opportunity over these 34 years to have the career that I've had, build the relationships that I've built, and have the experiences I've had if it weren't for Title IX. I grew up in a small farming community in the state of Iowa where there weren't a lot of sports for girls when I was coming up. And I remember being told I had to play boys baseball, which I did and succeeded, of course. I made sure I beat all of the boys when I played boys baseball. I was told I had to go to boys open gym to get my shots up, Tara, because they didn't have a girls open gym. So when I look back on my journey, there's no question that Title IX made a difference in my life and opened up opportunities both personally for me to compete and professionally for me to have a career in this business. So I just really appreciate Stanford asking me to be part of this today. So thanks for all of you for being here today. I also want to introduce my colleague and friend Danette Leighton, who is sitting on my far left. Danette is currently the CEO of the Women's Sports Foundation. Your very own athletic director, Bernard Muir, who is here with us today, is a member of the board of the Women's Sports Foundation. And if you're not aware of the Women's Sports Foundation, they're an organization that was founded by Billie Jean King back in 1974, I think. And they're really a leader when it comes to nonprofits in this space in terms of advocacy, in terms of education, in terms of funding, all for girls and women to not only be able to compete, but succeed and thrive in women's sports. And Danette has only been in that position for not even a year yet. She used to be my colleague at the Pac-12 Conference and had an office about 2 doors down from me. But we're really proud of Danette and the work that she's doing as the CEO of the Women's Sports Foundation. Danette also worked both in the NBA and the WNBA with the Sacramento Kings and the Sacramento Monarchs. And I'm sure you'll hear a little bit about that later on. She built quite an organization over there in Sacramento. But she got her start right here at Stanford. So hopefully later on she can share some of her early career experiences being right here on the farm. I know that Tara was definitely a mentor to her, and she learned a lot from Tara. So welcome, Danette. It's great to have you with us this morning.
Thank you.
And Tara VanDerveer, I told the event organizers today if I went through all of her accolades this morning, we would be here for 90 minutes at least, and Tara has practice, so we're not going to do that. But hopefully you all know Coach VanDerveer. She's in her 36th year here at Stanford, and the number of conference championships, NCAA appearances, Coach of the Year honors, the accolades just go on and on and on and on. She's a Hall of Famer. She's the all-time winningest coach in the history of Division I women's basketball. But the thing that's not on the accolades list that I wanted to make sure that I said this morning is I think her greatest accomplishment, quite candidly, is number one, the impact that she's had on generation after generation of young women that have come through this campus, but also Tara's commitment and passion for using her platform and her visibility to advance women's sports. So you all know the accolades. You know you have the greatest coach of all time sitting right here on your campus, but who Tara is as a leader is extraordinary in terms of this space. So thank you, Tara, for taking the time out of your schedule to be here. So I shared some of my personal experiences, coming up in women's athletics and not really having an opportunity to compete the way that a lot of my counterparts did. Right? I was forced to play boys baseball. I had to go to the boys open gym because there wasn't a girls open gym. And those early year experiences for me really shaped my passion for wanting to get into athletics and wanting to provide opportunities for women. I'm going to ask both of our panelists to maybe share an experience in your life It might be a really positive experience. It may have been a really negative experience that has fueled your passion for kind of carrying this baton and advocating for opportunities for women in the advancement of Title IX. And Danette, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Teresa. Well, it's really nice to be here. As Teresa shared, I did spend time on the farm, and I was mentored by this amazing person next door to me. I had the pleasure of being the executive director of the Women's Final Four that Stanford hosted in 1999, so I'm really going to date myself now. And that was held in San Jose, and I had a mailbox. I had an office next to the mailboxes in Arriaga, and I remember Tara would come visit me on a regular basis. And it was really the job that kind of was the catalyst for me to recognize what I really loved to do and wanting to advance the business side of women's sports. But I would say the one position that really fueled my fire on wanting to be an advocate for women's sports in particular on the business side was I spent almost a decade in Sacramento. For those of you that remember the WNBA franchise, the Sacramento Monarchs, who are fans of women's basketball in this room, it was an original franchise in the WNBA, one of 8. We were, as Tara remembers, because she would come up to some of our games, we would sell out the building. We had an amazing fan base. And for 9 years, I put all my blood, sweat, and tears in trying to make that a business, generating revenue, creating opportunities for our players, our team, our fan base. We won a world championship, went to back-to-back finals. And in November of 2009, I got a phone call that I was told I had to fold the team. And so it was probably the biggest moment in my personal career and journey after thinking I'd done everything right. You know, we had made, I would say, a little bit of money, which back then was pretty big from a women's basketball franchise perspective. But it was just a business decision by our owners. Nothing against our owners. They had treated us well. But it was just one of those things that I realized you can't really take anything for granted, even if you think you're doing everything right. And it really fueled me to want to make sure that more people cared about the business side of women's sports and recognized, I always like to say, if I could get one term out of the vocabulary in women's sports, it's called non-revenue. That would be my objective by the time I'm a great-grandmother, hopefully before then. Because I think business sports is a valuable business proposition, and I'm hopeful many more entities and organizations will see that in the future.
Tara, what about you? I'm sure you have just a few experiences that have maybe have shaped your position and advocacy for Title IX.
We do, Teresa, but we've practiced at 10 o'clock, so. Well, good morning, everyone. You know what I was thinking is, with our basketball camp, I'll have like 88-year-old girls in Kissick Hall, and so they're all in here, and I'll tell them my story of basically growing up, and from the 3rd grade we did 3-player weave in gym class, and I just loved basketball. I was crazy about it, but right then they did organized teams for boys, and I remember like sitting on the stage, and the boys got to play games that the girls didn't get to play, and exclusion is painful, and I remember just feeling this pain of not being able to play. And I tell the story to the young girls, the 8-year-olds, of, I never played, like when I was your age, I said, I never played, we never had basketball camp. I never played on a team. We didn't have a JV team. There's no varsity team. There's no college scholarships. There are no college teams. There are no pro teams. There's nothing on television, no Olympic teams. And I go through all this I'm on my little soapbox for a while. And finally, at the end of it, one little girl raises her hand and said, Coach, why was it like that? And I didn't know how to answer these little 8-year-old girls. So I said, well, can anyone else answer this question? And another little 8-year-old girl raises her hand and goes, sexism, like that, 8 years old. And it's when you need a law, in my sense of things, we shouldn't need a civil rights law, nor should we need Title IX, but unfortunately we do. And so my experience, I think, growing up more than anything was, it was just pain. It was pure pain of not being able to play and knowing that, like in my 9th grade yearbook, the gym teacher, who was also the boys basketball coach, wrote to me, to the best basketball player in the 9th grade, but I couldn't play on a team. And I went to school and I watched the 7th grade boys practice and the 8th grade boys practice. The freshman boys had a team, JV team, varsity team, and my dad was getting his PhD, so I studied in the gym. And I did all right. Amazingly, I did my homework at the same time watching practice. But then I'd go to the college practice and watch the college practice because my dad was taking classes at night. But it was, more than anything, extremely painful. So my parents moved. I'm the oldest of 5. My parents were all about being active. Long before, you know, healthy things, my parents were doing it. My dad was into organic farming before there was even organic farming. So, you know, eating right and working out. And we moved when I was in the 10th grade. And before that, a fun night was Friday night at the Y. You know, my friends and I would go, and I lived in a place that we played outside all the time. I did every sport, and I still try to do a lot of sports. But when we moved, I decided, all right, I need a new image. Okay, you can't play, so I might as well just be a cheerleader. So I went and decided to try out for cheerleading, you know, because that's the only way I could get to the game to watch the boys play. And I only knew one person at the school, and I forgot my gym suit that day. And to try out for cheerleading, I had to use her gym suit, which was 2 sizes small. So when I went for my big cheer, the whole front of the gym suit opened up. And needless to say, that didn't help me. It hurt me. I didn't make the cheerleading squad. But you know, it made high school miserable. And so it was before Title IX, but you didn't even know how to fight it. You know, so I decided I would go out for the boys' tennis team. And this was, you know, at a new school, and I was in March. I'm excited, and they said, we'll bring it up at the Board of Education meeting in July. I'm like, well, school will be over by then, of course. So I ended up actually transferring schools, and my sister, Beth, who was a year younger than me, played #1 singles on the boys' tennis team. And there were several boys that threw their rackets over the fence after she beat them. She won. My sister, Marie, who was 5 years younger than me, went out for the boys' swimming team at the time because they didn't have girls swimming. And they said, well, there's a problem. The boys don't wear their bathing suits. So my sister said, I don't care. They don't have to. I'm going to wear mine. And, you know, but that's what they dealt with. And she, you know, did really well swimming on the boys' swim team. And then finally, by the time my youngest sister was of age, you know, to play in high school, they had Title IX had passed, and she actually played on a girls' basketball team and a girls' softball team, and I think she played soccer too. But so the difference of being 10 years older than my younger sister, her experiences are so much different than mine. But I feel like my whole life has been shaped by Title IX because I was going to be a lawyer. I mean, like, there's enough lawyers in the world, right? So, you know, why not? I mean, and I've traveled all over the world. My parents told me basketball would never take me anywhere. And I've sent them postcards I've been all over the world, met presidents and, you know, Supreme Court justices and everything. And sports and athletics have provided me a life that I just have to pinch myself every morning I get up. Well, how fortunate I am and how much I love it. But I paid a price for it. And I think young girls, you know, still do in certain ways, and those are things that we'll talk about.
Thank you, Tara. You can hear kind of a common thread on some of these comments, and I agree with Tara. The experience that I had, it felt really isolating. You know, I remember growing up in such a small town. And I literally found, I was back at my mom's visiting over the summer, and I found the letters that my dad wrote to the city council. And because he had to write to the city council to just try to encourage them, like, we need a women's softball team. My daughter needs to have access to the gym. She wants to get her shots up. And it was really isolating. Mm-hmm. You know, we laugh now, but like all through high school, I mean, nobody asked me to prom. Nobody asked me out because I was kind of the person stirring the pot, and the administrators didn't like it, and the coaches didn't like it, so it's really isolating. And as a young person coming up, you know, it can really have an impact. And yet on the other side of the coin, here we sit, you know, your career, Danette's career, my career. We were joking the other day, we have more than a century of experience sitting right here. When you look at what Title IX has done and the opportunity that it has provided for young women to become who they were meant to become and to pursue their dreams and to compete and gain all the skill sets associated with that, it's phenomenal. So I do think part of what has fueled me over these years, despite some of those early experiences that I think we all had, it fuels me now to keep fighting and to keep being an advocate and to lead in this space because of the impact that it's had on so many, for sure. Let's talk a little bit about the start of Title IX, right? So up on the screen, I want to thank Tara's staff. They helped us with this PowerPoint. I know they're really busy right now, but her team did a great job queuing us up and preparing us for this session. This is the law, right? And I have to say that until the 50th anniversary, there really wasn't a lot of awareness about exactly what the law says. So I would encourage you to just take a minute and read those really powerful yet simple 37 words. Like, this is the law that passed. And you're hearing a lot about these 37 words this year as we're celebrating the 50th anniversary. Danette, the Women's Sports Foundation are really leaders in this space in terms of research, in terms of education, in terms of advocacy. During your work over the last 8 to 9 months in a leadership role with the Women's Sports Foundation, is there something that you have learned about the history of Title IX and maybe how the law came about that you didn't know before that you think is really interesting that you could share with our audience?
Yeah, I think, first of all, it's 37 words on the Department of Education, and like it's crazy how small it is. And there's one word in it that really has created why sports are included, and that word is activities. So Billie Jean always shares with me when I first started, and essentially she found the Women's Sports Foundation to be the guardian angels and the protectors of Title IX. So I always think about Billie Jean as a visionary. So she was playing tennis at the time, and we all know at that time she wasn't making the type of money that maybe a Serena was making at the end of her career. She founded the Women's Sports Foundation, and she created the Women's Tennis Association, which is probably the most successful professional tennis or women's sports league to this day. So she did that all at the same time. So a visionary of recognizing that it would be important to have an organization that protected it. What's really fascinating about the law and what I have learned is the primary people that really pushed it through, Edith Green, Patsy Mink, Birch Bayh. Patsy Mink's story is really interesting to me because she was the first person of color congresswoman coming out of Hawaii. So just think about that. She wanted to go to med school and was denied med school from 12 schools because there was quotas for women, and she got discriminated against for being a woman. So then she decided to go get her law degree. She got her law degree, but then she couldn't get a job because she was a mother and had a daughter. So both herself and Edith, as well as Birch Bayh, realized that there was a need to support discrimination and making sure there wasn't discrimination towards women in education. And they kind of slyly, as Tara and I talked about it, put it through a bill that was much larger and got Title IX passed 50 years ago. But the word activities was one that was being questioned throughout the whole time of whether it should be included or not included. And that one word has really allowed women's sports to thrive under Title IX. But the intent of Title IX in the very beginning was really about discrimination towards women in education, support around, obviously, sexual harassment, and all the things that were happening within the kind of education space for any federally funded institution. But activities has allowed it to be really the reason why today you see the fruits of our labor of 50 years of women and girls having access to playing sports and then education.
Thanks, Danette. Really, for both of you, Tara and Danette, you do a lot of speaking on this topic, really knowledgeable in terms of the application of Title IX. Is there something around Title IX that you think is widely misunderstood that you would like to educate our audience about? Because I think there's a lot of misnomers out there about Title IX and the intent and what it means practically in terms of implementation on our campuses. Is there something that you think is widely misunderstood about Title IX?
You want me to go?
You want to go first?
Well, I think that when Title IX was first implemented, there was this idea that it was going to kill men's sports, that was going to be the end of men's sports. And what's interesting to me is when I was at Indiana University, I paid an activities fee each semester to support men's sports. And at the same time, we didn't have anything compared to what they had. The men practiced in the main gym, Assembly Hall, from 2 until 7. And then we went afterwards. So the women's team, we had a volunteer coach. She wasn't paid. She was a grad student at Indiana. We bought our own shoes. We washed our own uniforms if we had uniforms. And I think actually there's a picture of me in a uniform on one of these slides. Scary. But, it was, but we didn't even know to question that we're paying an activities fee for men's sports. It wasn't even, we traveled in vans, they flew on a charter flight. The differences were like so incredible that, you know, we didn't even know. We sat, after practice, we'd come back and, you know, you're eating dinner at like 9:30 at night every night. We're having hamburger helper. I think that's why I'm vegetarian. But, you know, we would sit there and we would start, you know, a group of my friends that were also my teammates, we're sitting and just like doing fantasy exercise. Like someday, you know, there's going to be scholarships for women. Someday there's going to be professional sport for women. Someday I'll be a GM of a team or a coach, you know, and we were just making this up. And it was like, they would say, oh, Tara, you're crazy, you know, but it was a fantasy world. And, but we were subsidizing. As a student, I was subsidizing. I worked as a waitress. I was told I was the worst waitress that the person had ever had. You know, at the time, you know, my debt was not forgiven. You know, I paid back $20,000, which 50 years ago was quite a bit of money, you know, to go to school. And it was just a whole different thing. And, you know, so the idea that Title IX would somehow wipe out, you know, at the time there were men's football had sometimes up to 200 scholarships. You know, there were places that had over 200 scholarships, and, you know, that's when they put in the legislation of 85 scholarships for football. And, you know, just they'd have, it would be more than, there's 16 or 17 or 18 guys on the men's basketball team. So it was, I think that was the biggest thing, was that somehow women's sports were going to wipe out men's sports. And there is, you know, I think that there are more challenges for a budget. When you have 36 varsity sports, ask Bernard about that. It's challenging, but, you know, it can be done.
I think mine is more about, I like to show the connective tissue of what 50 years have done, and I think this is what I find is so powerful for where we are today. I think about if we didn't, at the end of the day, Title IX is all about girls and women having access, and that access is critically important. Access to education, access to playing sports. And now if you look at 50 years later and you hear Tara's story, I'll just take you on the journey of where sports are today. If you think about 50 years ago, you wouldn't, and girls and women didn't have the opportunity to play at the high school level and have some of the funding that came with it. And it could be as simple as what Teresa was referencing, being able to play on a softball team versus the baseball team, having the same uniforms, access. Then those opportunities to give those women access to go to college, earn a degree. I know one thing I always would say when I would talk about the Pac-12 was something that I was always so proud of, is Stanford was one of the only institutions that had women in their very first graduating class. Well, sport opened up those opportunities for women to get educated and to earn a scholarship to be able to play their sport, but also be educated. And if you look at the roster of players that Tara had gone through Stanford, not just those that have gone on to be coaches, but look at all of the players that have gone on to be judges and teachers and doctors and so many other things. That component is a critical component to Title IX. But then without it, you don't have the Olympic system that we have today. The collegiate system is the feeding system to the Olympic movement. There is no coincidence that the last pretty 4 or 5 Olympics, why Team USA women have dominated, it's because Title IX existed 50 years ago and the fruits of the labor have continued. And Stanford has always been an example of that with the women's sports that they've always sponsored and have had playing here, with a significant amount of them going on to playing at that Olympic elite level. Then you wouldn't have a WNBA, an NWSL, which is a professional soccer league, and on and on. So to me, to see the connective tissues that without Title IX, as sad as it is to think that we needed it, you wouldn't have all of what we have today. And it's very much at threat. And so we'll see a lot of great stats of celebrating for the next 50 years of what we've been really proud of. But there's a lot of problems, unfortunately, in this day and age that we can't just assume that Title IX is going to be protected, which is why an organization like ours exists, which is why everybody needs to be educated on why it's so important for girls and women to have access to sport. Because I don't know about you, I'm a mother of a daughter, but everybody has a relationship, whether it's a mother, a sister, a daughter, a niece, a granddaughter. I think all of us want a diverse society that allows for everybody to have access, and that's the intent of Title IX, access.
Thank you. So Danette mentioned, thank you.
Danette.
Awesome. That does deserve a round. Thank you, Danette. So Danette did provide some great data to us that really shows about the practical impact of Title IX over 50 years. So I'm going to walk you through a few slides. We won't go into great detail, but it does kind of at least show a visual of kind of where we were 50 years ago and where we are today. And then I think we're going to talk a little bit about, kind of what's next and why we are where we are and why it took 50 years, candidly. So the first few slides talk about the high school level, right? And that's really where it all starts. Like I talked about my experience, I started playing long before high school, but even when I got to high school, I still faced a lot of the same issues in terms of not having an ability to access the same level of coaching, the same level of facilities, the same level of support that my male counterparts did. And it played a role in my future because then the opportunities I had at college were impacted because my opportunities at high school were so weak. But when you look at this slide, it looks at the numbers in 1972, there were just under 300,000 girls participating in high school sports. And the most recent statistics were a couple years ago, and it was almost 3.5 million. So that's 11 times, right? In 50 years, it's increased by 11 times. Then if you look at the percentages, right, of girls and women that are participating in high school sports, it was 7%. Think about that, 7% of girls at the high school level were participating in some kind of sports activity 50 years ago versus 43% today, right? That's unbelievable. And then you look at this last stat on here, and the growth, like the opportunities have grown, but the gender gap still exists. There's still way more boys at the high school level competing in athletics and having access to sport than there are girls. And one of the things that Tara kind of referenced this earlier when she was talking about her camp, like I'm curious to just talk about like what does it say about our culture and what does it say about where we are as a country that a law had to be passed for this to happen, right? The numbers are amazing when you look at the growth, but it happened as a result of a law that required it to happen. So what can we learn from that in terms of human mindset, in terms of society, in terms of the country that we live in? Because I do think it's important to remember that, yep, the progress is great and these numbers are really encouraging, but it happened as a result of a law that was passed. Like, what can we learn from that? Like, what is your takeaway from that we need to keep in the back of our minds as we continue to push for more opportunity with the hope that those numbers look significantly different in the next 50 years?
I think the one that stands out, and so one thing we do as an organization is we do this type of research. So we just did a 50 years of Title IX research report, and you can see it all on our website, and I encourage you to read it if you're interested. We have a robust white paper, but also an executive summary. But what I don't love about this stat is the girls participating in high school sports are where the boys were in 1972 when Title IX was created. So sorry, I think that's really sad. I mean, that's 50 years that it took to get to the place where the boys were in 1972. So for me, I just look at this as, if we didn't have a law, where would we be? And so the reality is, I wish that we didn't have to, like Tara said, but we do. And I think my biggest concern is that Title IX has to be protected into the future. And for all of those, we'll talk about a lot of different, I think Tara and I have discussed the different generations that have gone through. And I'm very proud of the fact that my daughter could play any sport she wanted to play under the sun growing up. And if she wasn't my daughter, she probably wouldn't really understand what Title IX is. And it's really, really important that everybody understands what Title IX is so that it can constantly be protected for the next generations to come. And I feel that weight on my shoulders, as Billie Jean always says, pressure is a privilege. But there were pioneering people that came before us, men and women, that gave me the opportunity to have the life that I've had. I need to make sure that the next 50 years is the same. And unfortunately, with what's happened in our society of late, we don't think it's something that we can rest on without not continuing to fight for. So I think for me, that's the biggest concern that I have moving forward, and something that makes me proud of where we are 50 years later, but recognizing there's a lot of work to be done.
I think laws are interesting things in that sometimes there are unintended consequences of laws. And when Title IX was passed, at the time that Title IX was passed, 90% or more of the coaches were female, of female sports. I mean, of course, you know, women, we can't coach men. That would, you know, I'm just talking about the women coaching women. But, you know, the unintended consequence was because then maybe money came into athletics. Then now, what's the percentage of women coaching in sports? It's up there, I think, somewhere.
Yeah,
Let's show it right here.
It's under 50%. And so one of the things we have to do is go back now and get women involved in coaching and give them opportunities and train them. And I was at something yesterday. I think one of the parents of our recruits asked me, you know, why aren't more women coaching, or what are they doing, and you know, why don't they coach? And you know, they maybe have families. They're you know, the demands of coaching are such of travel. A lot of women have to check every box before they believe they can, you know, maybe take a job. And then, so that there's that one law, and now another law that I don't know exactly what the name of the law was, but the law that now lets our, maybe Bernard, you could help. What's the name of NIL law? I mean, is there a law? All right, so NIL, if name, image, and likeness, means that as a young athlete, a great athlete in college can monetize their name, image, and likeness, which we think is a great thing. You know, so a former, you know, players now could be part of an advertisement where in the past they couldn't be. But what is happening now, and again, I think it's an unintended consequence. Some women are doing very well. Haley Jones just signed a contract with Nike. She's one of 5 student athletes to be part of a Nike campaign. You know, Cameron Brink maybe is involved with certain things. But there are a lot of universities, you know, major universities that will have collectives that, in fact, are maybe rich alums that get together and just, you know, are supporting men's sports, which is happening. And some are supporting some women's sports. But here we go again, you know, here we have Title IX, and now we have this. Here's Title IX law helping this, and now you have NIL law that's supposed to be helping student athletes, and in fact could be creating, I mean, you know, the amount of money is quite a bit for like a top receiver to go to a football school offering $1 million, you know, and there's poaching and all that kind of stuff going on. So money is a big part of what is happening in athletics. And that to me, those are things that are maybe unintended consequences of 2 major laws that affect us a lot right now.
Yeah, Tara, I'm glad you brought that up. And the slide up there shows, you know, the trends of opportunities for women to coach, right? And it's trending in the wrong direction. And as Tara suggested, you know, as women's sports and women's athletics have gotten more popular and more lucrative, more men have decided they wanted to come over and coach women. The opposite is not happening at the same level, right? And you have the statistics up on the slide, but the Tucker Center at the University of Minnesota just put their report out the other day, and there was a statistic that was really staggering to me, which was that in Division I college athletics, in NCAA Division I college athletics, in women's sports, 23% of the coaching staffs were all male, meaning that you have a women's team, and at 23% of all the Division I programs across all sports didn't have a single female on their staff. Like, that's staggering to me. And we're sitting next to somebody who has made such a commitment to make sure that she always had women on her staff, not only as role models for the women that she coaches, but to also provide opportunity for the pipeline to continue to develop head coaches. Tara, let's talk a little bit about this issue though, right? That the trends of women getting out of coaching are really concerning, right? At a time that women's athletics are growing, the WNBA is growing, professional leagues, like there's so much interest, yet women are getting out of coaching at staggering rates. As someone who has been a leader in that space, anybody that goes to Tara's games and you look at her bench, it's inspiring, the amount of opportunity that she has provided for women to launch coaching careers and to provide great role models for student athletes. How have you managed your program in a way that has made it conducive for women to stay in the field? I mean, you have moms sitting on your bench. You know, how have you navigated that in partnership with Bernard and your department to make it a great experience for women so they will stay in the industry?
You know, I think it's a great job. I mean, I think coaching can be a great job, and you know, we just try to make it rational. I mean, there's the NCAA rules, or I think you know, they've followed some of the AIW rules actually. If you go back, shortening recruiting seasons. It used to be you could recruit all the time, and I mean, it's just I just try to make it a great job. But I do want to go back to one of the points that was made a little bit. You know, the disparity of what opportunities for girls and women compared to men are not a thing of the past. We went through this, if anyone followed the Kaplan report after the NCAA tournament, which our team was fortunate enough to win in 2021, there was and I don't know if there's a picture of that or not, but they were showing the weight room. Oh, that's a good picture.
Yeah.
Well, they were showing the difference in the weight rooms between the men's and the women's in the bubble of, we were in San Antonio and the men were in Indianapolis, and it was comical, except for it's not funny. You know, they showed a little weight bar, and the men had a huge weight room. The disparity of money spent at the NCAA tournament compared to the women's tournament, you know, you're all up here at 9 o'clock in the morning on Saturday. Read the summary of the Kaplan report. It's on the internet. Roberta Kaplan was hired by the NCAA to, you know, investigate what the NCAA is doing. And the NCAA they state their mission of, you know, having gender equity, and it's not even close. I mean, the amount of money that was spent on each male participant in the NCAA tournament compared to a female was hugely disparate. And that's, you know, you brought up the question, Teresa, kind of what do we value? We value men more than we value women. You know, I mean, I'm not going to say we're the Taliban exactly, but, you know, it's sad that, you know, your daughters, your sisters, your nieces, your granddaughters are not valued as much as, you know, your grandsons or your brothers, and that's the statement that's being made, and it's being made in a lot of different subtle ways, but that's what it is.
So I'm going to ask one more question, but I don't want to skip these great slides of Tara.
Oh dear,
back here.
I don't know. I said.
So I want to make sure we have some then and now. Is that it? Right. So I wanted everybody to see these because I thought these were pretty amazing that Tara's team put together. We're going to talk a little bit about then and now, and then we're going to pivot to Q&A. So get your questions ready. So you know Tara played basketball in the AIAW back in, and actually you were at IU when Title IX got passed. Is that correct?
Yes, I was.
In 1972?
I was playing in a basketball tournament, and I saw a little sign that someone had made, like on a sheet. You know how people take a sheet and paint it? And I'm like, what is that? You know, and it made no impression, but I remember seeing the sign and people were saying, oh, this is going to be a big thing. We're like, yeah, okay. Yeah. But and it is a really big thing, and it's a great thing. Teresa, before we do the Q&A, can I just say, and these are just the people I recognize with their maps, but we have two of the most outstanding women that have ever maybe played at Stanford. Kathy Levinson, two-sport athlete right here. Kathy, raise your hand. Just a phenomenal athlete, and currently, I understand, playing pickleball. And Kate Starbird, right in the front with her nerd hat on, her celebrating her 25th. What was amazing to me, no one was alive on my team, Kate, when you were playing. And it's, I mean, Kate came to Stanford and graduated as a leading scorer. She was a Naismith Player of the Year, All-American, went to how many Final Fours? 3 Final Fours, just an incredible. Kate is a professor at the University of Washington and just a superstar in her field, and just really exciting to see both of you. So that's what Title IX has produced, people like this.
Awesome, thank you. So we're gonna leave the screen up on the happy slide when we open it up for
that's
questions.
a good one.
Obviously, what Tara has built here at Stanford and who she is and what she stands for embodies what we want for Title IX. Well, you all are amazing. Thank you for staying some extra time with us. We could sit here all day and talk about this because we're so passionate. But thank you. Have a great day. Go Card.
Thank you for supporting the Cardinal.